Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by NEC Corporation on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Russ Roberts, the Transportation Security Administration's Chief Information Officer. Russ, before break, we were talking a lot about your strategy for digital transformation, the move away from waterfall and into DevSecOps and agile development, huge success stories. I love the fact you say I'm a SaaS first person, and I think it's nice to hear CIOs who recognize that they can put everything in the cloud as much as possible and take advantage of all that comes with it. So that leads us down the path of the pandemic. You mentioned it a couple of times, how COVID impacted. We know just from everyday life that the airports, the airlines, all of that was impacted in a big way because of the pandemic. How, from your perspective, how has the pandemic impacted your digital transformation strategy? And then we'll go a little bit deeper after we talk about that.
Well, first of all, you know, when the pandemic hit and it's sort of like you flipped the switch. You said folks aren't going to be coming back into the office. You know, we went down nearly 98% of all flying traffic stopped flying. So you know that was a major impact for our folks out in the field. Those flights quickly started to stop taking off overhead. So that was major, and then. You know, our headquarters that supports all of those field offices, folks weren't coming into the office. They didn't believe it was safe to come into the office. Luckily, I had invested in infrastructure, and it was pretty, you know, knock on wood, it was seamless for us. We had, I started this conversation with my top priority is stability, and I put my money where my mouth was. Never got questioned that, you know, you're spending too much on dual redundancy. But when we needed it, and all of a sudden you went from 200 people VPNing in to 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 people VPNing at your top at your peak periods, but we lost no capability. We were still operating at well below maximum capacity. So, you know, sometimes you get lucky when you make those kind of decisions, and we did. And I've got a fantastic team that not only made sure it was ready when we flipped the switch and everybody was on, but we had the ability to train people, because a lot of those people didn't know how to do that, to have the capacity to, you know, kind of train the trainer and get the message out and do all of that stuff, while at the same time answering the calls that came in. How do I do this? This doesn't work. So, you know, we transformed into a telework agency, like all the rest of them. And we did it in an exceptional manner. And, you know, I know our administrator, you know, pretty much every time he sees me, he thanks me for that. And of course, it's my folks who did that. But it was, you know, it makes you feel really good as an IT provider to be able to do that when something this major happens without any warning or any notice. So I'm really fortunate that we had the infrastructure in place to do that.
Generally speaking, TSA had maybe 200 people a day teleworking, and then obviously you went to, as you mentioned, 6, 8, 10,000 people. Was that on average 200 people a day or so?
Yes, you know, 200. There could be days with you know 6, 7, 800, but you didn't have 10 or 12,000 people on at a peak hour, which is what we see pretty consistently around the 10,000, maybe just under the 10,000 on at any given time. And of course, pretty much everybody's VPNing in so during the day.
And how did you, when you said you prepared for that with the redundancy, the dual redundancy, did you at one time say we may have to do this, or what was the thinking behind it? Because a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to pay too much ahead of time for something that I may never use. I mean, we heard all the stories from a lot of CIOs who said, oh, in a matter of a week or a day or 6 weeks, we had to upgrade our VPNs, upgrade our VDIs, change our network. You all seem to be there based on how you described it.
Well, you know, if I was a different agency where I had most of my folks at headquarters or just at a few offices, it's in a different environment. I always have to worry about losing one path, because email is a mission essential capability for us and our leadership in the event something happens, or just day-to-day operations when you've got to manage such a large workforce. Email is critical. It's absolutely critical part of the communications, as is Skype and the ability to jump on calls like this. We had a huge VTC capability that I said, I can't afford to lose this. You know, we would tabletop, and those are the kinds of things that came up. If we lost our email, we'd be in a world of hurt. And so I put the resources in there. It wasn't, bang for the buck. It wasn't an overly expensive expensive thing. There are things that you'd love to have redundancy on that, are very, very expensive. And then you have to weigh that with all the other things you're going to do. But, being able to get on these kinds of calls, being able to have the VPN available and the email available, I thought was mission essential for our agency, and put the resources in there. Because I always figured you could lose one. I could lose one. I need to be able to operate everything on the other. And then we're used to at TSA having some new threat streams and being, having to spin up very, very quickly and do things. We do it behind the scenes, but that's the nature of our operation.
At the same time, when you talk about the ability for the network to handle the VPN and people from email perspective and teleworking, did you also have to ensure the network could handle, for instance, new technology that you may be bringing in at airports for contactless or touchless for digital identity, for other types of technologies to keep TSOs safe? And, they can wear masks, they can wear a shield, you can put up plexiglass, but at the end of the day, I'm still giving you my passport, I'm still giving you my driver's license, or something that as contactless as possible. Is that something else you guys have prepared for?
Well, so let me break that into maybe two. So the technologies that we are pushing out, all that stuff's tested. We've got testing facilities to make sure that's ready to go. And then, like any smart organization that's this big, we'll put it in one or two places and see how it goes. We'll test it in our facility, and then we'll test it at a live operation, always ready to back it out in the event it doesn't work. And, every new patch is a new opportunity for 8 things to go offline. And when you have 90 mission systems and goodness knows how many other systems that we rely on out there, every time we patch something, we kind of, we have to be ready to pull that back and do that. As far as, new technologies out there, again, we'll look at those things before we move them out. We'll make sure that they're ready to go. And then if it's something that's going to take a huge amount of bandwidth, there are things coming up, maybe not that currently we're using, but if we get into artificial intelligence and things like that, you're going to have a different level of bandwidth. Are you computing on the edge, or are you computing back a little closer to home? How would you do that? Those are things we're looking at. You talked a little about touchless technologies, and we're looking at a few of those. One of those is, touchless when you come up to the TDC, and that's the area where they document check what you have before you go through the screening. You're in the screening line. You provide your boarding pass or your mobile phone and your driver's license or your passport. We're looking at digital ways to do that, touchless ways, so you don't have to do that. We got some technologies. They're not completely ready to go, but they're getting close. We're working on that. The way you enroll in some of our programs, whether it's TSA PreCheck and things like that, we're looking at touchless ways to do that, and ways to use the upcoming mobile driver's license. And we're working with that. We're working with companies like Apple, and the leaders in industry, Apple Pay and things like that. It's not so different than what we're looking at. So we're using those bright minds out in industry to say, how can we leverage that technology for TSA and to help our customers that are going through the lines at an airport or maybe a seaport, getting on a cruise ship. Those kinds of things are things we're looking at going forward.
I know this is a little bit outside of your swim lane, so to speak, but as you talk to the missionaries, you talk to the folks who are worried about, the mobile driver's license or touchless ways to deal with identity. What's your role in supporting them? What do you tell them? Hey, it's got to be secure. It's got to be fast. Tell me what the network, I can make sure their network is ready. What is your role in terms of that planning, that strategy?
Yeah, we have another office, requirements and capabilities analysis office, that does a lot of that stuff. It also works in with our acquisition and program management office, another office peer to mine, working on this new technology. Mine is to make sure we have people involved in all of their working groups, to make sure cybersecurity is being taken into consideration. Things as you're talking about bandwidth. If you're using an existing network, when are you going to tip it? When is it not going to be able to meet the requirements of the data that you got to pass? So we're involved in that. Again, I'm the authorizing official, so no system can go live without my approval. And largely, I'm looking at that from a FITARA standpoint, but largely to make sure it's cyber secure. We're not spending money on things that we shouldn't be spending money on. And we have a real good teamwork at TSA to make sure we're aligned with the administrator's priorities and the priorities of the agency to drive those forward. So it's pretty efficient and effective the way we do it. And I try and point out potential problem areas well in advance. I don't want to bolt myself on at the back end. as well. So, and that's busy because we have so many different initiatives and pilot programs going on in the agency. And I always joke a little bit, a pilot at TSA, when do you turn it off? If it really works, right? So I have to, as the authorizing official, I have to be worried if this thing is successful and we've allowed some risk in the way it's secured. How do we close that loop? If it was a really, really small pilot, it was only going to last 30 days. So those are the things when you're on the cutting edge trying to get that stuff out there, you have to be mindful of. And it's a good partnership, but it's keeps me busy, keeps the blonde hair in my head, I'll tell you.
I was going to say, your plate is never empty. I know that. One of the things when we talk about this idea of digital identities and even pilots, I know TSA back in August released an RFI looking for some ideas, suggestions around verifying passengers' identities at checkpoints in real time. Again, I know that's out of your area of expertise, but I guess I just wanted to know a little bit about how much do you play a role in terms of paying attention to this type of technology? Is this something that you spend time studying, looking at, or is this something more like as the mission folks or your requirements analysis folks or your program management folks kind of come to you and say, here's where we're going, can you support this? Like, where's the give and take?
Yeah, well, we work closely together. We first of all, when they're thinking of what they need, we're involved in that. We'll always be part of the team. They're very good at making sure the IT environments there. My little joke is, if it's a great idea and I don't know about it as a CIO, it might not be a good idea. You need to get our buy-in. We need to be part of that process to make sure we're thinking about the cyber and all the other things up front. And that's really works well at TSA. We do a really good job of doing that. And then when we're getting ready to put out that type of a request for proposals, my team will be involved in some of the writing up on those things. And then we almost always have our participant in the evaluation team, right? To take up the cyber piece, to take up, will it really work? Or maybe it's, are we going to be able to support that with our network? It may not be, does the technology work, but can we make it work? Can we pipe it? So from that perspective, the authorizing official in my organization has to be intimately involved with those things to make sure we select vendors and that we can actually execute the idea, the great ideas that they're coming up with.
I think too often we see the CIO in the old days, 5, 10, 15 years ago, the CIO being brought in at the end. Oh, by the way, Russ, we got this thing, make it work. And you're going, oh no. It's great to hear that not just TSA, but I think I'm hearing it from a lot more CIOs when I talk to them, that the involvement is at the beginning of the process, which makes the process work better and leads to more success. And obviously that RFI or whatever comes from it, you guys will know as they move forward with what's important to the TSA. Russ, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. We can talk a little bit more about maybe citizen services and maybe some more about cybersecurity. My guest today is Russ Roberts, the Transportation Security Administration's Chief Information Officer. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by NEC Corporation on Federal News Network.